Good morning. Welcome to Monday Morning Live and the Not Quite Ready for Primetime Players, presenting the Presidency of Thomas Jefferson. Applause, please. Boy, I sure wish I could have access to a major port city that would connect my country to the Mississippi River. We would be able to do so much business that way. Monsieur, I have a port city for sale over here. It is called New Orleans, and it just so happens to connect to the Mississippi River. Are you interested? Wow, what are the chances of that? I am interested. What are you asking for it? You know, buddy, I actually have a whole chunk of land that I'd be willing to part with for the nice round number of $15 million. It's those 875,000 square miles from here to there. Imagine the whole room. Are you interested in all of that? Wow, that's like 4 cents an acre. That would like double the size of the space I have right now. I'm not sure if I really have the power to make this deal, but you know what, buddy? You have a deal. Hey, Mr. Secretary Man. Yes, boss? Hey, Lieutenant Meriwether Lewis, you're good at hiking and camping and stuff, right? You learned that in the Army or something, right? Yes, sir. Well, boy, do I ever have a job for you. Go find yourself a team, go to the edge of the country as it stands right now, and then go past it into all of that unexplored stuff that I just bought. And I want you to do 3 things for me. Count them. 3. 3 things for me. 1, go find out if you can get from here to there entirely by water. 2, draw pictures and take notes of all the plants and animals and resources that you find out there. And 3, extend the full faith and fellowship of the United States to anybody you meet out there. And let them know that they're living in our country now. On the way, sir. See you in a few years. And scene. Claps for the definitely not quite ready for prime time players. Hey, I hope you appreciated that little one-man skit as an illustration to start our class. And well, let me go ahead and make sure that it made sense to you. I'll start like normal here. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever or wherever you are. Mr. Swanson here, room 1206, Pekin County High School, Alma, Georgia. If you're watching this audio guide video, it's probably because I'm not in class, and this is going to serve as our lecture for today. Or if you found yourselves in the deep, dark spots of the internet and you're on YouTube at midnight and, well, you're just here to learn about the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, hang in there. I got something to teach to you as well. So our topic of the day is the presidency of Thomas Jefferson, and a major event in the presidency of Thomas Jefferson is the purchase of the Louisiana Territory. So let me go ahead and make sure we understood the cast of characters that we just walked through. Cringy might be a word that the kids use these days. That might have been a little cringy. Let me go ahead and make sure you understand who we were talking with. So first of all, the skit started with President Thomas Jefferson. Now, we've been talking about him for a long time now. Son of Liberty, author of the Declaration of Independence, former vice president. Now we are into the presidency of Thomas Jefferson. And across the ocean in Europe, in France, General Napoleon Bonaparte, Napoleon Bonaparte. So, especially those of you who walked through world history, need to remember what we've talked about Napoleon before. And I think he visited room 1206 once upon a time as well. This is Sad Napoleon, and we'll talk about why Sad Napoleon maybe looks like Sad Napoleon. Here we have Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, and of course that was the raccoon skin hat, our two explorers, and they represent the core of discovery. So it wasn't just the two of them that got sent out with the three missions, and I'll make sure we remember what those three missions are, but they built an entire team to include notable figures like Sacagawea, young Indian translator and guide, also an African American man named York. We'll talk about the equality that existed in the core of discovery. And where did they go? What is the Louisiana Territory? So the Louisiana Territory, or the Louisiana Purchase, represented on the screen, represented on the PDF that you can be looking at as I speak to you here today. You can see that at the time of the purchase, the United States went from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. I'll move to this picture, a little bit more illustrative with the colors. From the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River, and the purchase of the territory was what's in orange, the Louisiana Territory. Now follow the script of the skit. Originally, Thomas Jefferson wanted access to the port of New Orleans. Okay, one city, one port. Now, water matters. Okay, port cities are money. A lot of times in world history, we say water is life. So purchasing the port, that would make sense. But once his diplomats got to France, Napoleon had a deal of a lifetime for them, and that was the purchase of the entire 875,000 acres of the previously French-owned Louisiana Territory, purchased by the Americans for the steal of a lifetime, 4 cents an acre. So that was just a real quick explanation of the script. Let's kind of pick it up right back at the start here. The Presidency of Thomas Jefferson, and a couple more notes on the Louisiana Territory. And in my class, if you're watching this in class, you got a couple notes to take today on Thomas Jefferson, and they are more the open-ended style. Instead of fill in the blank, just looking for the key word, really going to go to the baseball card, and you're going to fill in the accomplishments of Thomas Jefferson, as well as some specifics about the Louisiana Territory, Lewis and Clark, and the core of discovery. So your notes is a little bit on the simpler side today. Just hang in there for the story and a couple of videos posted at the end here as well. So the story of the Louisiana Territory. We got to know that the area was owned by France. Okay, as Thomas Jefferson comes into office, and we will maybe remember backwards yesterday to the Revolution of 1800, right? That the establishing the peaceful transfer of power from the second president to the third president, men of different parties. This is how Jefferson comes into office, but he finds himself in office in the year 1801. Itching for more. And the more started with the port of New Orleans. Okay, so the territory was owned by France, and France is at war with England. Not in North America, okay, not on our continent, but in Europe. France and England have been perpetually at war for darn near 2 decades at this point. And of course, that goes back to George Washington's stay neutral, maintain, don't get involved in foreign entanglements. I mean, this is still the war that we're dealing with. So the territory is owned by France. New Orleans, owned by France, really is the key to the Mississippi River. Okay, it controls access to the trading that can happen on the Mississippi River. And even though the young United States has access to a lot of the river, the port itself would be very desirable for us to also have. So originally, that was Thomas Jefferson's first request, or his big desire was the city and the port of New Orleans. Now, also happening at this time, and a little bit more in the world history scale of things, is that the Haitian Revolution on the island of Haiti, the country of Haiti, is an uprising by slaves against their French colonizers. And it was very expensive for Napoleon financially, and costly for the French army in lives. So the Haitian Revolution, it makes Napoleon lose his desire to colonize in North America. He has his army spread out too far. He's losing money and men by holding these territories in North America. He doesn't care for it anymore. It's not worth his efforts, much less the expense. He would rather trade land for cash. So enter the conversation with the American diplomats. Jefferson wanted the port of New Orleans for trade reasons. It was currently owned by France. You're going to see that this slide is entitled Explaining the Skit. Go back to my cringy acting, and this is going to help it all make more sense. So Jefferson sends delegates to France. This delegation is led by James Monroe, and if you'll look to the president's wall, your right-hand side in the room, you'll see James Monroe will be our 5th president. And you may recall James Monroe was involved in the XYZ affair of John Adams' presidency. So James Monroe has done a lot in the early republic before he becomes the 5th president. James Monroe and the delegation goes to France to attempt to purchase New Orleans. They are originally authorized to spend up to $10 million, right? I mean, adjust that for inflation today, and that's in the $300 million range. But to buy this significant city, to gain access to the Mississippi River, it was worth it to us. That was the original ask. So we had conversation. Jefferson and Napoleon, no, not dynamite. Napoleon Bonaparte. So here's the key characters. This stage of the story. Continue explaining the skit. Well, Napoleon has recently lost interest in colonizing in the New World due to the Haitian Revolution. Cost him money, cost him men, cost him time. He's got enough difficulty holding territory in Europe. He can't really worry about colonizing in the Americas. France is involved in numerous wars and bottom line needs cash. The territory that Napoleon holds in North America, he would rather turn that into money. So a lot of times we say in this class, it's all about the money. Follow the money, you'll find the story. And this is definitely one of those cases. So this is now Sad Napoleon. This is why Sad Napoleon enters the story. He is not doing very well as a colonizer in the Americas, needs cash. Enter this new deal. Napoleon here receives the delegation, hears their ask. They ask for New Orleans at $10 million, and he counters their offer by offering all of the Louisiana territory, not just New Orleans. And he throws out the price of $15 million. For 875,000 acres, crunch the numbers, do the math. I did it for you. That's 4 cents an acre, right? Now, as a lot of y'all in the room here, family probably owns, some land in Alma, real estate. Now, the deal with land is location, right? Land on a corner lot in town is going to be more valuable than land in the middle of an acreage or land by a creek or a swamp. But generally speaking, if you're going to go buy land in Alma, I actually just looked it up the other day. Generally speaking, again, this is not every acre in town, but land here is going to be about $6,000 an acre. 2023, right? Adjusted inflation, all that kind of stuff. But today, if you wanted to buy an acre of God's green earth in Alma, Georgia, it's going to cost you about $6,000. So 4 cents an acre. I did the adjusting for inflation. It's 74 cents an acre. Okay, take 4 cents in 1801, make it $2,023, 74 cents an acre. Obviously, the real estate deal of a lifetime, right? The steal of a lifetime to gain that much land at that low price. Obviously, Jefferson would be a fool to not take up the offer, right? Well, let's see how he wrestles with this decision. So it is not just as cut and dried as cha-ching, here's my money, we'll take the land. Absolutely, this is what we're going to do. Jefferson finds himself in a constitutional conundrum, right? A constitutional issue. Jefferson's not sure if purchasing territory is constitutional. Remember, Jefferson is a strict interpreter of the Constitution. He's actually made his reputation on being one for limited government and a strict interpreter of the Constitution, meaning if we didn't write it on the paper and we all voted and agreed to this paper, then you can't do it. And we've already come through the debate of elastic interpretation, the elasticity necessary and proper clause, right? Alexander Hamilton and the Federalists would say, hey, you can do whatever is necessary and proper to govern the country. Jefferson has made his mark by saying, no, if it's not in the document, you can't do it. So now he finds himself in a position where his values are being pulled both directions. I think this is a great example of where politicians a lot of times campaign on one set of promises or even set of values. And then when they get in the seat, right, whatever a job it is, Congress, Senate, the president, when they sit in the chair that holds the responsibility for the decisions to be made, they realize that it might not have been as simple as they thought it was going to be when they were campaigning. And this is exactly what Jefferson is faced with. He's not sure if it's constitutional to purchase the territory. He therefore expands the power of the presidency by making this purchase. So much for limited government, right? His entire reputation has been built upon being the limited government guy. We can only do what is in this Constitution that we agreed to. And here he sits in the executive mansion, the White House, going against everything he has ever preached. So this is going to be part of the legacy of Jefferson. Sometimes he says one thing and then his actions did the other. So here's a takeaway. This is a big takeaway on who is Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson's writings offered the belief of a strict interpretation of the constitutions. Jefferson's actions, on the other hand, showed a loose interpretation of the Constitution. Slap this into your notes. This is a big piece of the legacy of Thomas Jefferson. Said one thing, preached one thing, did another. I'm not calling the man a hypocrite. I'm not. I'm pointing out that sometimes politicians campaign thinking one thing, and then the burden of leadership or the reality of the situation just shows it to be entirely different. And Thomas Jefferson got to experience this certainly firsthand in his Constitution, or in his presidency. In his personal writings, he says that he stretched the Constitution until it cracked. Now, did he physically stretch the piece of paper? I'm trying not to rip my paper. No, he didn't physically stretch the Constitution. Metaphorically, he stretched the Constitution so far that it cracked. And I believe it probably grieved his soul a little bit to realize that he made such a stink about the strict interpretation of this document. And then in his own leadership, he had to realize, oh, maybe necessary and proper has a place, right? Maybe Article 1, maybe that's exactly what it means. He actually says that the Constitution does say the president has the authority to govern territory, and that implies the right to acquire territory. So he does try to resolve the constitutional issue by saying there's an implied, get it? It's not written down, but it is implied that the president can acquire territory. Here's what he actually does, right? So to get around the constitutional conundrum, technically he doesn't purchase Louisiana, but he makes a treaty with France, and the treaty calls for acquiring this territory for $15 million. I mean, call it what you want, okay? Yes, the Senate can make treaties with foreign nations, and the president approves those treaties. So he did use language that maybe satisfied his soul. He used his treaty-making power to acquire Louisiana for the cost of $15 million. He bought the Louisiana territory, right? Here's a key takeaway in all of U.S. history. Louisiana territory doubles the size of the United States, okay? There's sometimes there's just some simple facts we got to understand. The Louisiana territory doubles the size of the United States. And when this treaty is ratified in 1803, it becomes official. So again, this picture, showed it to you before, I'll show it to you again. Previous United States, Atlantic to Mississippi, Louisiana purchase doubles the size of the United States. So just a key fact that you got to walk out of a U.S. history class knowing. And look at it. I like this picture in particular because it shows current state lines. We can see that, I know it's called the Louisiana Territory, but it actually only includes a little bit of the current state of Louisiana. Yes, New Orleans, and this is the L-shape of Louisiana right here. Some of present-day Arkansas, Missouri, all of Oklahoma, North Texas, Kansas, Eastern Colorado, Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming. That's a lot of the present-day U.S. being acquired, purchased from France at this time. So having bought the thing, what now? This is where enter Lewis and Clark, the guy with the raccoon skin cap. The Lewis and Clark expedition is commissioned to go explore what we just bought. Think about this. I'll make the real estate analogy again. I mean, 4 cents an acre, that's a good purchase, right? Real estate. But how many of y'all, how many of your parents have ever bought a house sight unseen? I know that he said the internet and you can get on the websites and see a bunch of pictures, but how many of y'all are going to make a large purchase? Houses, $150,000, $300,000, a large purchase. How many are going to make a purchase sight unseen? Now, I would guess not many people are going to make that large of significant financial purchase sight unseen. Well, that's what Thomas Jefferson did. We literally had no idea what was out there. But, acquiring the land and expanding, that was the belief. That is what he valued. So having purchased it, now let's go see what's out there. And Lewis and Clark, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, were hired to explore the purchased land, and they were commissioned with three specific tasks. Their expedition becomes known as the Corps of Discovery. Now, this is one of my favorite facts to bring students in this class. This word right here, it is not corpse. Corpse is a dead body. This is a Latin word, and it is corps. The P and the S are silent. And what it means is group, right? It's as simple as saying a group. Modern day usage, the United States Marine Corps. Okay, if you're going to enlist in the Marines, don't say you're going to the Marine Corps. Those recruiters will make you a corpse if you say Marine Corps. So the Corps, just trying to make you smarter every day, the Corps of Discovery, the group of discovery. So a couple of famous paintings of them. We get the character Sacagawea, not the character, the real life figure Sacagawea, York, and I'll tell you a couple of specific stories about them here in just a second. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. So Meriwether Lewis, both of these men had Army experience, as a lot of young men did in this time period. Meriwether Lewis was Thomas Jefferson's personal secretary. I don't know what you think of secretaries these days. Someone that does administrative work or typing. Basically, it was his do whatever I need guy. Right? If he needs some household chores accomplished or he needs his paperwork filed, he was the guy. Okay, secretary is a fair word for that. Meriwether Lewis. Well, when Jefferson makes the purchase, he basically summons Lewis and says, "Hey, don't you have Army experience? Don't you know how to do some hiking and camping and such? Well, guess what? I got a job for you." So he takes his friend, his confidant, his personal secretary, and he gives him the job of exploring Louisiana Territory. Lewis calls his old Army buddy, Clark, William Clark, makes him second in command. So it becomes known as the Lewis and Clark Expedition. And they gather about 50 more adventurers, 50 more people who are capable of surviving in the woods and willing to go on this adventure. And they create what is known as the Corps of Discovery. Two more pictures for you here. So this is Sacagawea. This is a young rendering of Sacagawea, and we do not have any photography of Sacagawea, so we certainly don't know exactly what she looks like. But we do know that she was between 14 and 16 years old when she joined the Corps of Discovery. When she joined the expedition, she was pregnant. She was with child. But the reason she was selected to be a part of the team is for her language skills. She could interpret to local Native American tribes that they were going to encounter along the way. Her tracking skills, she could show them the way, and of course, she knew what was out there and they didn't. Her knowledge of the land, the rivers, the animals and the fish, the flora and the fauna. So she had a lot of knowledge that they didn't. She was considered an equal on the group. This is pretty cool, right? In an era where women were pegged below men, and I'd say we're not going to run away from the uncomfortable facts in U.S. history. This is an era where men were seen above women. But guess what? Out in the wild, out in the unexplored, untamed, wild Louisiana territory, she was a leader. The men followed her. Why? Because she knew what she was doing and where she was going. So the take on that is, doesn't matter who you are, age, gender, size. She was a petite young woman, literally pregnant, and she was the leader of the men, right? They trusted her, they relied on her, and she showed her value time and time again. She brought them food, she took them through to safety, she interpreted for Native American tribes who might have otherwise been hostile to the group of white people coming into their land, but she was able to show that they were coming in peace and in the spirit of discovery, not conquering. Another thing is that the presence of a woman also made the group less aggressive looking, right? If a group of men was coming into your territory, these native tribes might assume that they were coming to conquer, but the presence of a woman kind of brought a milder attitude, and she was able to help kind of dissuade some of the hostilities that might have been there otherwise. She gave birth to her baby along the way on the journey, and the baby became kind of like adopted by all the men in the expedition. Right? They all became the baby's godfather, and his name becomes Jean Baptiste, which is actually French for John the Baptist. Sounds like John the Baptist, French phrasing of that. And he was raised and cared for by many of the men on the expedition, to include, he actually spent his teenage and adult years with William Clark. Okay, so I'll just fast forward to the end. Sacagawea dies in her 20s. And when she passes away, the child, finishes his childhood years, is raised by William Clark. So just quick little character analysis, biography on Sacagawea there. There's plenty more about her, and the video that you watch at the end of this will tell you a little bit more about her. This is York. York was the slave of William Clark, and York in the United States was considered enslaved and did not have any freedoms, could not vote, and was considered subcategory, right? I mean, again, African slavery, something we've been dealing with, one of those uncomfortable topics as well. But here's the special take on who is York and why he mattered to the core discovery. As soon as they crossed the Mississippi River, as soon as they left St. Louis and went west, York, just like Sacagawea, was considered an equal. There were several occasions where the group cast votes, democracy, right? On should we camp here? Should we go left? Should we go right? How far do we want to travel today? Several occasions where they took votes, and both Sacagawea and York had an equal vote, not a half vote. It's not like the other guys had 2 votes and they had 1 vote. They had an equal vote. So what wouldn't have been possible in the Americas, in the United States, was possible out west. And the take on that is very similar to what I said about Sacagawea. York was worth what he could accomplish. Skin color, age, gender, it didn't matter. The only thing that matters is who are you to the team? What can you provide to the team? And just a bit of a glimpse of the equality that is deserved both for gender and for race. And of course, our country is going to continue to battle that for many more decades, even centuries, in the rest of our story. So women and racial rights represented in these 2 characters. Unfortunately, the rest of the country did not really catch up without much more struggle and much more time. So just a little bit of a character snapshot on each of these 2 people. A little bit lesser figures in U.S. history, but I always like to bring you the extra details as well. So finish out a couple of the details here. What were their missions? Just like I said in this skit, 1, find the Northwest Passage from the Atlantic to the Pacific Oceans. There was a belief that there is a water route across the continent. And at the time, take yourself back to the age of discovery and European exploration and all that. At the time, they would have to go around the southern tip of South America with their ships to go from one coast to the other, to go from the East Coast to the West Coast. All around the southern tip of South America took a lot of time and was more expensive and was more dangerous. The belief was that there would be a route all the way across the North American continent via water. It was not yet discovered. Many people tried to discover it. And so one of the commissions, one of their goals was to discover this Northwest Passage. I'll just tell you today, it doesn't exist. Okay. Nobody has been a failure to find it. It doesn't exist, but many people did try. There's just no way to go entirely across the continent by water alone. So that was one of their missions, even though it was impossible to accomplish because it literally doesn't exist. Mission number 2 was to record any information that they gained along the way, specifically plants, animals. What are you seeing there? They cataloged a lot of species that had never been seen before. A lot of birds that were not present on the East Coast. A lot of mammals and plains animals that were not present on the East Coast. Creatures that just didn't exist on the East Coast that were in the open plains of the West. So they're seeing animals, plants and animals for the first time. And part of Lewis and Clark's expertise was art. Like literally they could sketch in their sketchbook with, I'm not an artist, I'm a stick figures guy, but a lot of their sketches are very detailed, very accurate. They took measurements, they took very precise recordings of their locations, bends in the river, forks of a river, a lot of details about all the resources and geography and people in the territory. Obviously people, they're encountering natives. And of course, what they're saying is, hey, we bought this land, so you're in our country now. Welcome. By the way, welcome. And that's actually the third mission, is to extend, here's the exact language, the full fellowship of the United States to any people groups you meet along the way. So welcome to our country. You're in it now. And, for a lot of these native groups, of course, their territory has changed hands a lot in the previous century. The Spanish, the French, the British, these Americans, whoever they are, right? To the natives, this has always been their land. But part of the diplomatic mission was to say, you're in our country now. So the full fellowship of the United States is being extended to you. Explaining the game, and I really kind of already have, Lieutenant Meriwether Lewis was Thomas Jefferson's personal secretary at the time. Thomas Jefferson commissions him to lead the Corps of Discovery into the new territory. Lewis brings on his old Army buddy, William Clark. I use the phrase battle buddy a lot. These two were battle buddies, so it makes sense that it's the Lewis and Clark expedition. Their names are always said together. The Corps of Discovery departs from St. Louis, Missouri. St. Louis is at this time called the Gateway to the West. Now, if you look at the map, and if you find St. Louis, it's just to the left or the west of the Mississippi River. At the time, that was as far west as our country extended. We would call that the middle of the country and almost Southeast Conference territory, right? I mean, University of Missouri, SEC, right? We would not call that the West. When I say the West today, I know you're thinking California, Oregon, Washington, maybe Las Vegas and Nevada, right? That's the West. Well, at the time, St. Louis was considered the gateway to the West, right? That was as far as mail would go. That was as far as supplies would go. St. Louis, that was the West. Well, these guys started in St. Louis and stepped into the unknown territories going farther to the West. So they set out in May of 1804. They reached the Pacific coast in November of 1805. So that's over a year, right? What is that, 15 months? And then, of course, they got to come back. They returned to St. Louis in September of 1806. So that's a little bit over 2 years, about 26 months, a little bit over 2 years of being gone. And here's what's wild. Once they set out, it's not like they could send a text message back. So the longer the journey went on, without people hearing from them, newspapers started to speculate, their families started to speculate and wonder, are they still alive? And, the longer it went on, people began to think, oh yeah, they're not alive. They're not coming back. Like, we haven't heard from them in 1 year. They're dead. We haven't heard from them in 2 years. They gone. But guess what? In September of 1806, they showed back up in St. Louis. And I can only imagine this ragtag group of about 50 people coming back into civilization, being like, hey, remember us? Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, nice to see you again. Yeah, 2 years later, my hair's a little longer and I got some wrinkles around my eyes, but boy, do I ever have a story for you. And here's my journals, by the way. So pretty cool that they made it. They survived. In total, in the whole expedition, only one person passed away. Only one member of their team got sick and died. So for all the danger that they did experience, it's pretty amazing that almost all of them were able to come back home alive. A little bit of a modern day connection. Anybody ever been here? Every year I got a couple students that maybe have visited St. Louis. This is called the Gateway Arch. It is a very large structure in St. Louis. If you look down, you can see people, right? I mean, they look like ants. So that kind of gives you perspective on how large it is. This was a national monument constructed to represent that St. Louis used to be the gateway to the West. And that's why it's called the Gateway Arch. You can actually enter the arch and travel all the way to the top. If you look at the tippy top, you see some black squares. Those are windows. So you can stand at the top of the arch and look down. And the way you get up there, it's like an elevator. And it's almost like stair steps on the elevator. You lean back, you go up, you go forward. You lean back, you go up, you go forward. It's almost like you're going upstairs in this little elevator container. It almost feels like you're in an egg pod. Anyway, I got to do it when I was in high school when I visited. So should you ever find yourself in St. Louis, something to go see. And there's Cadet Swanson in St. Louis, and I think that was 2008. I was doing like this, like I'm running through the Gateway West Arch or something like that. I don't know why I'm doing that little weirdo pose right there. But I like to show you my pictures just to show you that you can travel. And when you see stuff, take pictures. Because someday you're going to want to tell your family and your kids about all that you got to see growing up as well. A little bit more about the legacy of Lewis and Clark. There's a lot of statues of Lewis and Clark around the country, and a lot of these statues depict them also with a dog that they picked up along the way. This dog's name is Seaman, and this is a very large statue, kind of grainy. I'll come to this picture here. Seaman is a Newfoundland breed of dog, and the reason that Seaman was picked up for the journey is because Newfoundlands are known for being good swimmers, and actually were very often used to rescue sailors who may have fallen overboard. So they kept Seaman with them for protection, and especially there were instances where canoes tipped over and Seaman was able to rescue some of the voyagers, some of the explorers who were maybe struggling in the river. So Seaman, the dog, very often depicted with Lewis and Clark. And then a question for you, does anybody know how we honor Sacagawea today? The answer is on the $1 gold coin. So today I know there's a lot of gold coins. I think they got a gold coin for every single president. But the original gold dollar coin was Sacagawea. And I remember when this came out, the year 2000, you see it right there. So this is Sacagawea, and it references her baby, Jean-Baptiste. So it shows her as a mother. And at the time, it was the first Native American woman on a coin in America, and the first mother being depicted with her child on a coin. So that's a pretty good way to honor Sacagawea as well. And believe it or not, I think this is a little known fact. Sacagawea is the most statued woman in America. There are more statues of Sacagawea than any other woman in America. And I just did a quick Google search, Sacagawea statue. And quite frankly, I just couldn't even pull all of them. So I just got a screen grab here of how many Sacagawea statues there are. And, you can look at that for yourself. But the woman who has more statues than any other woman in America is Sacagawea. So I think that's pretty cool as well. So all of that, starting with the skit up to now, that was kind of a take on the most important fact about Thomas Jefferson's presidency, which is the purchase of the Louisiana Territory. Now, got about 10 more minutes here. Now I want to give you kind of some details about the rest of Thomas Jefferson's presidency as well. So he is definitely known as the Louisiana Territory guy. Okay, in our class, that's the key vocab, core vocab. But there are a couple more things I want you to know about Thomas Jefferson as well. So let's remember how he got elected. The election of 1800, often called the Second American Revolution or the Revolution of 1800. It was the first peaceful transfer of power from one group to another. The first time, perhaps ever, honestly, in the history of the world, that a defeated group willingly gave up power. No armed, we didn't have to have the army come in and escort Thomas Jefferson in the White House. We didn't have clashes between the followers of Adams and the followers of Jefferson. This is why we call it the American experiment. Will this work? And the answer was yes. The defeated group willingly gave up power, and that sets the precedent, very important precedent, right? I think it's the gift that John Adams gave us. In his defeat, he still gave us one of the most important gifts in the history of a republic, and that is willingly leaving the White House and giving up power to the guy who won the election. So and this is the election of 1800. Jefferson's inaugural. So he's the first president inaugurated in Washington, D.C., and he occupies what is known as the Executive Mansion at that time. His election is a little quirky. There's a bit of a quirk in the Constitution, which had him tied with. So we know he beat John Adams, but I want to tell you about how he actually won the presidency. There's actually a tie between himself and Aaron Burr. And I say that name, you may think about Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. Initially, there's a tie between Jefferson and Burr. So under our Constitution at this time, the winner is supposed to be the president, and then the second vote getter is supposed to be vice president. Well, these two are neck and neck with the exact same amount of electoral votes. So the process is that the vote goes to the House of Representatives in order to break the tie. 36 ballots, and they remain tied, right? So the House of Representatives votes 36 times, and each vote gives the same results. They are still tied. So enter Alexander Hamilton, who, by the way, does not like Thomas Jefferson. Okay, we know that they are opposites. Federalist, Democratic, Republican. They're in George Washington's cabinet, and they didn't necessarily see eye to eye, right? So they're opposites. But you know who Alexander Hamilton hates more than Thomas Jefferson? Aaron Burr. So Alexander Hamilton orchestrates a deal where the votes will go towards Jefferson instead of towards Burr. And on the 37th ballot, Jefferson wins the presidency. And because of Alexander Hamilton's work behind the scenes, this was specifically an insult to Aaron Burr. And part of that leads to the duel or the affair of honor between Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, which costs Alexander Hamilton his life, leads to Hamilton's death. So part of that, part of the Hamilton story is tied up into Jefferson's election as well. So all of this to say, Jefferson's inaugural is, is a major deal because, one, Adams is defeated, and two, anyone who supported Burr maybe feels a little bit slighted, and Burr himself comes in as the vice president, but maybe he feels like he should have been the president. So it's in a very important time for Jefferson to establish a moment of unity. And what he does in his inaugural speech is he outlines the principles of limited government. This is going to become known as Jeffersonian democracy, right? The idea that the government should have less to do with your life instead of more. The idea that states should have the power versus the federal government, right? We're here to govern, but we're not here to lord over your lives. And interestingly enough, the purchase of Louisiana territory is going to kind of go against that. Famous statement that he says in his inaugural address, he tries to be a uniter, and he says, "We are all Republicans, we are all Federalists." Kind of the idea that we're all in this together, and it doesn't matter who you voted for, we are Americans, we are all Republicans, we are all Federalists. A couple of his early accomplishments. Now, the Federalists were reeling from a lot of unpopular policies, and the chief one being the Alien and Sedition Acts. So Jefferson lets those expire. So that's kind of a no-brainer, right? Nobody likes those. You voted for me, not for Adams. Alien and Sedition Acts expire, so they're gone. Jefferson cuts taxes. Who doesn't like taxes being cut? That's positive as well. He also, anyone who was imprisoned by the Alien and Sedition Acts, he frees them. So he does several things up front that earn him more supporters, right? He lets people out of jail, cuts taxes. People seem to be in favor of Thomas Jefferson. This next one here, I'm just up front with you. This is not a part of GSE standards. Okay, this will not be on the EOC, but it's just so stinking cool. I got to talk about it. The Barbary Wars are actually a pirate war that the United States was involved in. Did you know that? Pirates of the Caribbean, literally, Thomas Jefferson is involved in a pirate war. It's called the Barbary Wars. So pirates in North Africa are attacking American merchant ships, capturing the ship, capturing the cargo, which you might call booty, capturing the sailors, and basically demanding bribes, or they called them tribute payments, basically bribes in order to release their captives, release the ships, release the cargo, release the sailors. Ransom, more or less, right? They're holding them hostage, holding them for ransom. Well, Jefferson, we can't really stand for this, right? And we also don't want to negotiate with pirates. We don't want to pay the pirates, because that's going to set a precedent that if you capture our ships, we'll just pay for them. We don't want to do that. So Jefferson sends the naval ship, the USS Constitution, to set up a blockade between North Africa and the trade routes that we were using to get our cargo into Europe and Asia. And this is seen as standing up for ourselves. So this is seen as a positive, a strength in Jefferson's presidency, because we are standing up for ourselves. We're not letting the Barbary pirates win. And it's just kind of a cool story, guys, right? I mean, pirates, Thomas Jefferson. Did you know that American sailors fought pirates? Now you do. This is actually the ship that Thomas Jefferson sends to that blockade. This is the USS Constitution, or nickname is Old Ironsides. And the cool thing about Old Ironsides is that it is still floating today. It is literally the oldest commissioned warship still afloat in the world today. It's not a museum. It's not something you can just go and look at. It is an active duty Navy ship. It is commanded by an active duty Navy captain, and it is still a part of the United States Navy. I think it's what I think is really cool about this. Man, you know your video is going too long when the lights go out twice. Gosh, we just lost power altogether. We did lose power, but I still have Wi-Fi, so I'm gonna finish it out, man. Okay, so the USS Constitution is the oldest commissioned warship still afloat. Fought in the War of 1812, and it is still active. It's literally still active with the United States Navy today. Interesting thing about this, and I'm gonna give this kind of like the old Go Army perspective. Interesting thing about this is that it is the only ship in the United States Navy that has sunk an enemy vessel. literally every other ship, all the World War II ships, all the Vietnam ships, all the Iraq War, Persian Gulf ships, all those have been decommissioned and retired. And the only ship still active that has actually sunk an enemy vessel is the USS Constitution. So it's almost like, why do we have a Navy, right? If none of your ships are sinking the enemy. I'm just kidding. I know it's because they get decommissioned as well. The next slide you're going to see, not behind me now, so this truly is an audio guide. Next slide you're going to see is about the embargo of 1807. And I throw this one in here because to show the thumbs up and the thumbs downs of Jefferson's presidency. This is something that was a little less popular. What it did was banned trade with France and Britain. Now, George Washington always said maintain neutrality, and really, I think what he meant by that was keep doing trade with France and Britain. Okay, don't cut one of them off and do trade with the other. Just keep doing business as usual. Well, Jefferson takes neutrality and says we're not going to do business with either. And in the end, really all this does is hurt American merchants, right? They don't have anywhere else to send their, they don't have anyone to do trade with. So not a popular move by Jefferson, the embargo of 1807. Get into Jefferson's legacy, and I don't have the slides there with me, right? But get into Jefferson's legacy. So he gets to handpick his successor, and that is going to be James Madison, right? Jefferson serves 2 terms, 8 years, and James Madison is his Secretary of State. Secretary of State is basically seen as the president in waiting at this time, and that's not necessarily true today, but at the time, the Secretary of State was basically seen as the next president. And Thomas Jefferson more or less ushers James Madison into office. Now, of course, there was an election, but with Thomas Jefferson's support, James Madison was voted on as the next president. He renews his friendship with John Adams, and we talked about that yesterday. They were rivals after the election of 1800, but in 1812, they renew their friendship. And for the next 14 years of their life, they do stay in touch with each other cordially. They have a bet with one another who's going to live the longest. And they end up dying on the exact same day, July 4th, 1826, 50 years to the day after the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. And sometimes I just wonder, right, as they're younger men in the year 1776, and this big thing is happening, and quite frankly, it's treason, and they don't know how it's all going to work out. Did they know they would live 50 more years? Did they know they would live exactly 50 more years, both of them? Obviously not. I'm sure that's not something they thought about at that moment. But, I wonder looking backwards if they're like, oh, it was a good 50 years. Like what we accomplished as revolutionaries and in this early republic, it was a good 50 years. A little bit more about his legacy. He's a walking contradiction. Okay, he's loved and loathed, both L words there, loved and loathed. He was a man who supported individual rights and the language that he wrote in the Constitution, all men created equal, but he owned slaves. So support individual rights, but I own slaves. He authors the Declaration of Independence. So how can he believe one thing and then enslave human beings at the same time? And then there's a quote here, kind of sum up his thoughts on slavery, is that he says that slavery was like holding a wolf by the ears. And imagine that. Like, just go visual with me here. A lot of y'all have dogs, right? And you maybe play with your dog, and of course your dog is not a vicious wolf. But if you're holding your dog by the ears, scratching it by the ears, you're holding your dog by the ears. Now imagine that it is a vicious wolf, and you're holding this wolf at bay. You can neither let it go, because if you let it go, it's going to destroy you, and you have to keep hanging on to it to keep it at distance. The point is that slavery was like holding a wolf by its ears. It's dangerous. It's bad. Got the wolf by the ears. It's snarling at me in my face, but we don't know how to let it go. If it is released, it'll tear the nation apart. Pretty powerful quote. But bottom line is Thomas Jefferson didn't have the courage to take actions against slavery. I really think he was unable to envision a diverse America. An America where men and women were equal, and in America where races were equal. He literally couldn't imagine America as it exists today. So the slavery question is complex. A lot of the founding fathers really thought it would fade away naturally, that they didn't need to take action against it. And of course, that was a fallacy in all of their thinkings. And Thomas Jefferson's quote is pretty powerful there. Slavery was like holding a wolf by its ears. Finally, who is Thomas Jefferson to me? Thomas Jefferson is the founder of West Point, the United States Military Academy, where I went to college. So I'm telling you a little bit about the story of West Point as the year progresses. We started with Benedict Arnold and his actions at West Point. Now we have Thomas Jefferson, who founds the military academy on March 16th, 1802. And West Pointers today, me to this day, we call this Founders Day. And what happened on this day is that President Jefferson signs legislation to make West Point America's first school of engineering. I hope this is still streaming. So it establishes a school of engineering for the Army, and this school of engineering actually predates the engineering programs at Harvard and at Yale. So Ivy League schools. West Point was actually older than both of them, and it remains the longest continually occupied military base in the Department of Defense. And of course, it is the Army's undergraduate college, which is where my story starts. And it is a National Historic Site as well. It's basically a living museum, and Thomas Jefferson saw the value of it and signed it into existence. So thank you, President Jefferson, for founding West Point. The pictures you'll see on your screen there it's a statue of Thomas Jefferson, and it's actually in the West Point Library, which is known as Jefferson Hall. So his namesake is still at West Point to this day. Last slide you'll see there's one of my favorite videos to show in class. It's called Weird History. You wouldn't think a video called Weird History would have a lot of historical validity to it, but it does. This series called Weird History, it's got a lot of great facts, and it's top 10 facts that you didn't know about the Lewis and Clark expedition. So go ahead and take a chance to take a second to watch that video. You can go backwards in your packet if you need to catch up. You can go forwards in your packet if you have time. There's Bookit, and your catch-all for the whole time that I'm gone. Your catch-all, if you have extra time, is you can watch America, the Story of Us. I've hyperlinked episodes 1, 2, and 3. I doubt you'll have more extra time than getting through 3 episodes of America, the Story of Us. So stay on task, stay on track. I appreciate you all for doing the work you're doing. I'm getting good reports from substitutes and from administrators as well. So from a dark room 1206 where the lights literally just went out, I hope this audio guide has worked for you. Mr. Swanson, love you, mean it. Catch you on the flippity flop.